My name is Dara Kerr, and I'm a reporter with CNET. I just finished a story about Uber drivers being banned from driving after they say they were falsely accused by riders for doing things they didn't do. In researching the article, I spoke to 5 drivers who told me similar stories. 3 of them were accused of drinking and driving. All suspect riders were likely motivated to make these complaints just so Uber would give them discounts on the rides. I also spoke to Uber, who told me for safety reasons they have a zero-tolerance policy for driving under the influence. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Uber declined to join in this conversation. With me now, I have Mr. James Moran, who was a full-time Uber driver until December, and Mr. Bryant Greening, an attorney who represents riders and drivers in accident and injury claims. Thanks for joining me. Mr. Moran, can you please tell us what happened to you?
It was in the mid-month of December, and I'm 76 years old, and my eyes aren't the best. But sometimes because of the moving of the goalposts with Uber, you drive more than you had to before. And I'm assuming it was at night. I also drove in the morning, but I had a normal shift. I have COPD. I take certifications. But I'm a good driver. I mean, my driving rating is great.
What kind of medications do you take?
I take inhalers. I take various different inhalers, emergency inhalers, Sobertrol. When you have COPD, you know, every once in a while you get an event for no reason. I also take really strong Fisherman's Landing lozenges to clear the airways and the sinuses. And they're, as my 16-year-old kid says, you smell like a drugstore. Dara, I don't remember anything happening. I had no event. Nobody in the back seat said, what are you doing? You just ran over somebody. I don't remember. No idea. And the next morning I get up, I try and work. And I have a note from Uber saying you've been temporarily deactivated as they go through the process of finding out what happened. So they did whatever due diligence that they did. And they came back, and I had written them I sent you the text, right, of what I'd written.
Yeah.
And they came back and they said, you are one of our better drivers. Thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. We'll be back to you later. And they came back and they deactivated me because I was assumed to be by an unconfirmed person that I was under the influence. I have a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old boy. I can't ever drive drinking. I mean, it's just ludicrous. You know, I've done 7,000 rides with Uber over 3.5 years. I'm one of their top riders. 7,000 rides. And now, because of the climate of the deeper looking into the performance after the disclosures, after the IPO and the transparency that they had to reveal that they had so many sexual events plus so many rapes, and they've been panicking for a long time, and they just shut the door, no matter what you do. They have I don't believe they have any really standard upon an individual. It's just like a closed door.
So as of today, you are permanently deactivated. Is that correct?
From Uber.
Yeah. And you're still driving for Lyft.
I actually got a notice today from Lyft saying, thank you very much. The last week you gave 47 rides and you had 24 5 stars, nothing less. And your rating is 5.0, which it has been.
Yeah.
No, I have to drive Lyft. If you're 76 years old and you got laid off 3.5 years ago from your job, you're not going to get hired. And if you got 2 kids, you have to work. This is the only job that I can get.
I really appreciate you sharing your story. And Mr. Greening, I'm curious, have you heard similar stories from drivers?
We get calls every single day from drivers who have been deactivated, and we find that many of those deactivations are based on false accusations. We are seeing that riders are using false accusations as a mechanism of getting either free rides or retaliating for petty disagreements. One of the things that we have recently seen is that there is a rise in accusations of drinking and driving when there's simply no evidence of the driver having engaged in that act.
And do you see drivers that will get sobriety tests and still be deactivated?
One thing that drivers commonly do is drive to a police station after a false accusation and ask for a breathalyzer. And even when they submit those breathalyzer results that show 0 blood alcohol content, a lot of times the companies are not willing to consider that evidence and reinstate the driver. There is simply no due process in rideshare. So as an independent contractor, a driver can be fired for literally any reason as long as it's not unconstitutional.
That's a really important point, because it is true that, you know, they can at will fire the drivers without any explanation since they aren't officially employees. And that's that, it seems. What do you think should be happening, or what do you think could be a better solution as far as these false accusations go? What could the companies be doing?
Well, safety always has to be the top priority. If there's an allegation against a driver, the companies have a responsibility to investigate. But there's also a responsibility for fairness, and that means getting all sides of the story, collecting evidence, and having there be repercussions if they find that a passenger has made a false accusation. A driver may need to be temporarily deactivated while a company determines whether they were driving under the influence or high on drugs or driving unsafely. But if it's determined that that accusation was false, the passenger needs to reimburse the driver for the time off or be permanently deactivated from the platform. It can't be a one-way street where passengers get to make any accusation that they want and the drivers 99% of the time bear the brunt of it.
Yeah.
Can I interject? Can I interject one thing in that? And I agree with what he's saying. However, oftentimes, you know, the behavior of a driver may insinuate something to the passenger that is not true. However, the passenger is reacting in his own world. So I wouldn't want him to be penalized for expressing his feelings. You know, I think it's more important that we have some transparency so the accuser and the defendant can have an opportunity to resolve it.
So I spoke to Uber for this story, and it seems that the company could be caught between a rock and a hard place because they're trying to make the platform as safe as possible, and then they're dealing with these false complaints. A company spokeswoman that I spoke to said that Uber has a specialized team dedicated to investigating all safety complaints, and team representatives speak to both riders and drivers and then take the action that they deem appropriate, which includes deactivations. She said each case is handled individually, and they do this with safety at top of mind. Part of that is being in accordance with many states' zero tolerance laws. California, for example, requires that the companies do this. And in 2018, Uber got in trouble for not quite following those laws and was fined by the state of California $750,000 for reportedly not investigating all of the rider complaints about possible drunk drivers. So it appears to be doing its due diligence now. But as you said, Bryant, Uber sometimes appears to take the side of the rider over the driver. I spoke to Lyft also, and they have a very similar protocol to Uber with the zero tolerance policy, but they say they also analyze riders' previous interactions with the company to ensure that there isn't a trend of false accusations or misleading reports.
Well, I would hope that Uber would do that. I would love to have Uber call me and say, we want to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. So I really appreciate the two of you speaking to me about this really important issue that is affecting a lot of drivers' lives. And thank you for joining me.